All right. We'll be in Daniel chapter 12. Before we start, my wife has an announcement to make to the Sunday school class. Stand up. Stand up where people can hear you. Little red-headed boy. Yeah. And they were just about ready to send us pictures, and then everything went blank. We couldn't get any response, and they ended up having to take him to the what they call that NICU unit, and uh, it ended up being just a precaution when he was being born. They don't just use forceps now they use vacuum cleaners. Not exactly a vacuum cleaner, but they have a vacuum thing that they literally latch onto their head with to deliver the baby, and his head swelled. Any surprise? My head would have swelled. They'd have hooked a vacuum on my head. And so obviously it happens sometimes with babies, but we finally got our first picture this morning. So we had to wait all night long and pray all night long for that. Anyway, before we get started, um, last week, just to follow up a little bit about last week's Sunday school lesson, um, everyone keep in mind we're talking about events that's taking place prior to the rapture of the church, and but there's a lot of things going on. News is happening so fast that you can't keep up with it, and there's all kinds of things been taking place around the world. If you're paying attention, you'll know and hear about these things. I talked about that dark star and everything. Well, the actual news of that finally hit the prophecy blogs this week, and because in Australia, and there's a reporter in Australia who dug it all out, and he's like the Cheryl Atkinson of the United States, and he come out with a whole bunch of this, and it set on fire the everything, talking about all these things that could possibly be happening. Volcanoes, there's like 4 new volcanoes erupted this week. One was in Italy, but it wasn't the one that we spoke about last week. It was another one. Earthquakes are picking up, and they're happening in pockets. They're calling them earthquake swarms. There's one going on in Idaho right now. Of course, I don't know how close Idaho is to Yellowstone. I assume it's a ways, a few hundred miles anyway. But there's uptick of activity at Yellowstone. Then on top of all of it, I didn't even get into famines and pestilences. But did anyone hear about the 2 Chinese students they caught smuggling in fungus and a form of ag terrorism? And it was a fungus that, if released into a crop, it would spread through the United States like wildfire, and it would basically upend the wheat, barley, and rice harvests. And luckily, this, China. And there's a lot of things going on, obviously, around China and Chinese students and all those things right now. And so, and with everything that's going on, I mean, news is happening so fast. I think that Chinese thing came out the first of the week. If you went to look for it on a newsreel online, it'd take you half an hour to find it, because there's so many news events that's happened since. Obviously there was a thing that happened with Ukraine bombing Russia, using little bitty drones to destroy a third of their planes. I mean, things are happening really fast and going on. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about events that's leading up and warning signs that's going to be taking place prior to the rapture of the church. And so we landed in Daniel chapter 12 last week, and I'm going to read a few verses to you, and then we're going to talk about them. And I'll start with verse 1. And it says, "At that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which standeth for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. And they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, and they that turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words, and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased." So I'm going to focus there on verse 4, on two specific things. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. So let's look at the first one. It says men are going to be running to and fro. What does that mean to you? Okay, confusion. Say that again, Ruth. Okay, busyness, a state of busyness. Yep. So we see our own president flying all over the world looking for peace. Brother Harold, increase in travel. I want you to think about that. I mean, when Daniel wrote this, how did people travel? You walked, and if you didn't walk, if you was fortunate, you had a donkey or a horse or a camel in his instance. And obviously some probably had boats if there was water nearby. I mean, it was that way. I mean, Heather, think about your mom and dad, how they rode to town. I'm sure they probably told you stories about going up and hitching up the team and going to town. And I grew up listening to my grandparents talk about, hitching up the team. And they, if you lived close to Powersville, you rarely went to Unionville. That's where my dad was raised. If you was raised in Livonia, you rarely went to Unionville. That was a big deal to go to Unionville. It had to be a big deal. But look at how all that's changed. I was reading not too long ago about the missionary Adoniram Judson, who went to India. When he left Boston, it was in the early 1800s. It took him 4 months to get from Boston to India by ship. And I was thinking about how long it took for y'all to get to Thailand. I know you had stops and delays, but actual flight time, do you not have any idea how much flight time y'all took? Okay, well, think about that. To be able to go halfway around the world in, 15 to 20 hours. And I did do the distance between here and Thailand, and it's almost 8,700 miles. Now think about that. So we're definitely running to and fro. So whether you go to the city and you see everybody just going everywhere like ants in an anthill, or whether it's the planes or the cars or the transportation, space shuttles or whatever, whether it's, like Ruth said, people are so busy in their lives that they don't have time to slow down long enough to pay any attention to the Lord or to serve Him in any way. It's prophesied. And knowledge shall be increased. This is a big one, but more easier to focus on. Now, how would Daniel know that? Does anyone know how long it took? Traditionally, it took for knowledge to double, man's knowledge to double. Before 1900, it took 100 years for man's knowledge to double. And then by World War II, it was doubling every 25 years. And now, today, with everything, the technology that they have, they say that now knowledge is doubling about every 11 hours. Can you comprehend how much there is out there? It's doubling every 11 hours, so it'll double twice today. I obviously I pay attention to just about everything that's going on in the news. I'm a fact person. I don't care about anything else but facts and information. That's why Cheryl goes and does puzzles with her mom of an evening, and I sit and hunt for more information. By the way, me and Jackson have become kindred spirits. He's just like me. And so if you pay attention, he's always coming up and showing me something. That kid's discovered fossils out in the river gravel along the side of the building, because I gave him some fossils here a while back. But anyway, Elon Musk, which we're all aware of who he is now, and all that, and obviously he has this SpaceX company, and they're literally transforming space travel. But he has a goal to have a spacecraft on Mars in the next year, and by 25 years from now, he wants to see 1 million people settled on Mars. And then there's the artificial intelligence. We've all been hearing about that. If you're looking online and you see videos or pictures or things, the vast majority of that is not real. It's been manufactured. And it can be manufactured to the point, if you really aren't paying attention, it will fool you. And this AI technology is literally, we always, if y'all probably aren't into sci-fi, but I always was a sci-fi person, because it's man's imagination. Man's imagination of what he can imagine, they're beginning to carry these things out. So what was sci-fi 25 or 50 years ago is now fact, by the way. But it was where you can create a computer that can begin to think for itself and act on its own. That's what AI technology is. And Brother Ballinger came up to me after Sunday school last week and said, "Did you hear about this?" They had this, I don't know whether it's a computer or a robot or what it was, and they told it to shut down, and it refused. And, yeah, I mean, I can tell you about a movie that's about that. But I want you to think about that. But go ahead and look at our children. We were concerned for our children that they wouldn't learn math because calculators had been invented. They didn't have calculators in school when I was there. They had old-time adding machines. So you'd click them and you pull the arm on it and it would add. And that was pretty good. But our teachers still taught us how to do math. And we still sat down and figured it out. In fact, our teachers taught us how to do it in our head. I remember in third grade, standing in front of us, they'd line us up and have us do math problems in our head. Do you think a young person today would have any ability to do math in his head? We went to graduation one year, and there was a boy that was a valedictorian, and he was waiting a table at the restaurant at the marina. And I had a meal that was like real easy to figure, and I gave him a $50 bill. And he reached for the calculator, and I said, "You could probably just figure that one in your head." He said, "Yeah, right." And he grabbed the calculator and everything. I already knew how much change I had coming. I already knew. But he hadn't even given the thought to the fact he couldn't figure that simple math in his head. But that's just an act. Why would a child even need a college education if he had an AI technology to tell him what was wrong? I could see where they would do away with colleges. This is just me thinking, okay? I mean, they got AI programs for pastors. I mean, if Pastor Stanley wanted to, he would give it, okay, this is the text I want to use. He could plug that in 3 minutes. It would write a 45-minute sermon with illustrations. Think about that. In fact, with AI technology, he could probably have Spurgeon writing his sermons. Yes, Ruth. It's just the start, okay? And in fact, we're going to get into a little bit of this. I want you to think about all the technology, obviously, with the satellites and the computers, the smartphones, and all that. I mean, most of us are carrying one of these or something similar to it. This thing knows everything I'm teaching in Sunday school. It knows everything. I mean, it's got my fingerprints. It's got my facial recognition. It's got everything, whether I signed up for it or not. Everything is on this. Every word pastor preaches, everything that I say in private, if I've got this on me, it's listening. And it knows what's going on. This is going to be a tool, I believe, of the Antichrist. In fact, let's leave Daniel here, and I want to take you to the book of Revelation, chapter 11. I'm going to look at a couple of passages here real quick. And I'm going to go into a bunch of detail here. I'm just giving you examples of how I believe the technology is going to be manifesting itself and used by the coming New World Order, Antichrist, the system, the world system that is being set up before our eyes. You know, I fought debit cards until just about a year ago when they finally quit taking my checks in places. I mean, I didn't want no one tracking what I'm doing, and I realized they're tracking my checks too. They're tracking everything. Anyway, let's start in chapter 11, verse 7. Now, this is talking about these two prophets that God is going to send to prophesy for 1,260 days or 3.5 years. And so, anyway, that's what we're talking about here. And it says, when they had finished their testimony, the beast, that's the Antichrist, that ascendeth up out of the bottomless pit, shall make war against them, and shall overcome them, and kill them. And their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt, where our Lord was crucified. That verse there is a whole study in and of itself about the importance of Jerusalem in the last days and how bankrupt they're going to be during the tribulation. We'll cover that down the road. All right. And it says, and they of the people and kindreds and tongues and nations shall see their dead bodies 3 days and a half, and shall not suffer their dead bodies to be put into graves. And they that dwell upon the earth shall rejoice over them, and make merry, and shall send gifts one to another, because these two prophets tormented them that dwelt on the earth. Now look at that. God sends these two witnesses, and the beast, the Antichrist, kills them. Finally, after 3.5 years, he kills them. Did you notice in verse 9 that everybody in the world is going to be watching? I can just see, they lost Jesus after 3.5 days. I could just see the cameras that's going to be sitting there focused on those dead bodies. No one's going to come and steal them. No one's going to walk in at night and take those bodies and say they were resurrected. It's not ever happening again. And by the way, I believe that the Jews will be the main proponents of that. I'll get into that later too. Because this is taking place in Jerusalem, that the Bible here calls Sodom and Egypt. There's a lot there. Technology, how are they going to do it? Pull out your phone and look. I firmly believe that after the church is gone, that everybody in the world is going to be issued something like this. Some way they're going to be issued something that's similar to this. I don't know if it'll look exactly like this. I think I read where there's 50 billion devices. It's 50. I can't. I'll find those statistics. The number of devices that there is present in the world right now is unbelievable. When you add the computers and the phones and all the different kinds of technology. Anyway, but they're going to be able to see these judgments. This technology is going to be a form of globalism. It's going to be a form of global surveillance. And this technology is going to be used by this world system. The table's being set. Now look over in verse 13, or chapter 13, excuse me. And I'll start reading with verse 11. And we're speaking here about the false prophet. And it says, I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he hath 2 horns like a lamb, and spoke as a dragon. So, this will be a man who's coming to be a religious leader, a spiritual leader. And it says, and he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them that dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast which had the wound by a sword, and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, that no man might buy or sell, save that he had the mark or the name of the beast, and that the number of his name. And I'm not going to go into the rest of it. So here he speaks of an image that has intelligence, that can think and speak and watch. What did we just talk about with the artificial intelligence? That's it. And, the groundwork has been laid for quite a while for this new world order, you might call it, this one world system. And I mean, we used to think that, everybody was going to watch all this through their TVs. Well, it's kind of hard to get a TV out into the jungles of Africa, but you can get a smartphone out there. With a satellite, you can give it service. But literally right now, I mean, everything we're doing is being watched. How we spend our money is being watched. how we live our life, what we spend our money on, our search histories. Everything's being watched. And you can say, well, I'm going to throw my phone away. I'm not going to have a smartphone. Okay? If you got a smart light bulb, you're being spied on. Or a smart refrigerator. Of course, a smart TV. If you look really hard, there's a little camera. What do I do with ours? I put tape over it. That's the dummy one that they've got. The one that they're really using is the one I can't find. Just so you know. Even your smoke detector, your vacuum cleaner that automatically vacuums your floor, all those things are set up to have the technology to spy on you if they need them to do so. And you think, why would they do that? Why would they put that technology in there? Oh, here's my statistic. There's now 50 billion devices connected to the World Wide Web around the world. So, the beast is going to know, the Antichrist is going to know whether you're worshiping or not, whether you be to be killed or not, because people will be saved after the church is taken out. There's not much that he's not going to know about you. That is one of the prophecies. Knowledge shall be increased, that we're seeing carried out in these last days. Now let's move on to 2 Timothy chapter 3. I'll tame this down just a little bit before the rest of you go and join Bobby's class. And it's the me generation. When people have their focus on themselves, that's a sign of the last days. 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1. I'll wait for you all to find it. As soon as I quit hearing pages turn, we'll read. Here we go. This know also that in the last days perilous times shall come. For men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasures more than lovers of God. And get this, this is talking about spiritual people, people who claim to be Christians, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. From such turn away. Does anyone know how many selfies are taken in a day in America, well, around the world, by chance? I know you don't. Any guesses? Oh, well, you've got a bigger imagination than even the... Actually, there have been trillions of them taken. It's up to almost 2 trillion. By the way, does anyone know how big a trillion is? It's a million. It's a million. That's a billion. That's how they figure our national debt. Don't get me started. But if you went back a trillion seconds, how far back would it go? A trillion seconds. To give you an idea how much money they're spending or how many selfies have been taken. Does anyone know how many years a trillion seconds would be? I'll tell you. It would be 26,000 years before the flood. That's a trillion seconds. But literally, they estimate, I went to a website on selfies, and they said there's an average of 5.3 billion selfies taking every day, 78 billion a year, and about 2 trillion has been taken. Most of them are taken by women. No surprise. I don't know why that is. It seems to be a woman thing, but could be. I mean, we took 3 selfies before we came to church every morning before we go to church. Cheryl takes our picture, and we have to take 3 because only one of them is going to be good enough. She deletes the other 2, and she sends them to her kids. I don't know what you say, but I know you send them. You say Happy Lord's Day. And so the Antichrist knows every tie I've worn since we started taking selfies. And did you know that they even keep track of how many deaths are selfie related? Thousands of. Do you know what the number one cause of death from taking selfies is? Drowning. By far and away, more people drown from taking selfies than anything else. And most of them die in India, by the way. That's where they have alligators that eat you when you fall in the water. It seems silly, but what we've done is we've raised a generation of people, especially as the younger generations are coming up, where they're more concerned about their image, they're more concerned about themselves. And is it any wonder the church struggles to reach these younger generations? Is it any wonder we were talking about this new grandson, and I was asking Cheryl, I'm a man, I've never had a baby. I said, how could a mother who has carried a baby and felt it growing and wiggling on the inside of her body for 9 months, deliver that baby? How could they neglect it? How could they abuse it? How could they do these things? But yet here it says they were without natural affection. But how could that happen? But we see it happening every single day. Look at the number of children that are in the foster care systems and things like that. I mean, not even counting the number of abortions. I'm not even going to go there. But how does that happen? How does all this come to place? But, I mean, you'd think a mother would want to take care of their child, or a dad. A dad would want to lead and support and protect his children. That's the whole thing. It's selfishness. That's what leads to the me generation. When we worry about the biggest stumbling block that we have to reaching the lost for Christ, is they don't want to commit their time and have to say, I'm going to do this every week for the rest of my life. Are you kidding me? Let alone 2 or 3 times? That's the me generation. This is prophesied. It's gotten progressively worse through time. It's just about reached its peak. All right. I'm going to stop there because, but it gives you an idea why the seeker-sensitive church has grown. Because the only way they've been able to get experienced people, to get people in their church doors, is to bring them in and lure them in, appealing to their senses. I'm dealing with a young man right now that got saved in the jail in Unionville, and he lives in Kirksville, so I don't get to see him, but I communicate with him every single morning, and I send him a message every single morning, and he's been sending me back music videos and videos of, they got this newfangled, they're not cartoons, what do they call them? I don't even know what they call them. Anime? Are you familiar with that? Anyone familiar with that? It's some kind of cartoonish type thing. But he keeps sending me these things, and he keeps telling me that my church loves gays and homosexuals and people who live together and all those things. And so I have to keep answering him biblically. But he's in this war because we challenged him to find a church that opened the Bible and preached the Word of God, and didn't lure him in with a lot of visual things and to connect to his emotions. But he can't get past how much he loves those things. And so he's struggling. He's in this battle, and he keeps falling back into his old life, and he drags himself out, and he calls back, and, goes back and forth and back and forth. And so that's why I just keep being a steady presence in his life every day, sending him. Mike Stanley sends out a thing every morning. It's a challenge to men, and I've just started forwarding that to men that would take it, and I communicate with him every morning with that, and he always responds. But that me generation is prophesied. This is a sign of the last days. Let's move on. Let's turn to Luke 17. It's kind of amazing how many things the Bible pointed to that was going to take place in the last days that we might not even have thought about being relevant. And this is a passage that I'm going to look at more than once through this study. I'm going to pull certain things out of it each time we look at it. So I'm going to look at it under a certain set of lenses, I guess, as we read this. Luke 17, verse 26. It says, Jesus is talking about, he's foretelling his second coming, and he's talking about the rapture of the church and those things. And he says, and as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of the Son of Man. They did eat, they drank, they married wives, and they were given in marriage until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and the flood came and destroyed them all. Likewise also it was in the days of Lot, as they did eat, they drank, they bought, they sold, they planted, they builded. But the same day that Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. Even thus shall it be in the day when the Son of Man is revealed. I'll stop right there. And I'm going to look at one specific thing, and that is the days of Sodom and Gomorrah. What were the characteristics of Sodom and Gomorrah? Unnatural love, all right. Drunkenness. Okay. They were not hospitable to people who traveled in. Lot immediately took the two angels in. For what reason? To save their lives. They were violent. They were selfish. They were apathetic. They were prideful. There was social injustice. And obviously, sexual immorality reigned. Sound familiar? I mean, think what the homosexuality movement has done in the last 25 years, even more in the last 10 years. I mean, this is something that when I was in high school was mocked, completely unaccepted. We'll go out on the street and ask the average 17 or 18-year-old what they think about it. They say they're just people. They have a right to be like they are. But extreme sexual perversion is one of the signs of the last days. In fact, I want you to turn over back to Revelation chapter 18. I'm going to tie this in a little bit. Revelation 18. I'm going to start reading with verse 9. It says, "The kings of the earth who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her shall bewail her and lament her, for when they shall see the smoke of her burning." This is the great city, it's going to call Babylon. We'll discuss this later. But it says, "Standing afar off for fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, the mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth her merchandise any more. The merchandise of gold and silver and precious stones and of pearls and of fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet and all fine wood and all manner of vessels of ivory and all manner of vessels of the most precious wood and of brass and iron and marble and cinnamon and odors and ointments and frankincense and wine and oil and fine flour and wheat and beasts and sheep and horses and chariots and slaves and" what? "The souls of men." What does that mean? They've made merchandise of everything. Worldwide, in this year, 50 million people will be human trafficked. 12 million of those will be children. Some are sold into forced labor, some as child soldiers, some as servants, some in forced marriages, and of course there's the sex trade. Over 50% of those human trafficked are women. In America, in 2022, I couldn't really find any newer statistics. There was 88 million child sex abuse reports in our nation. And that's what was reported. Has anyone noticed, it fell in by the wayside in the news this week, the Democrats have been whining about this guy who got wrongfully sent to El Salvador. And they've been going down and seeing him in this prison and everything. Have you been watching any of this? It's been going on over the last few months. Abrego Garcia is his name. They finally brought him back. Yep, they brought him back. You know why? They thought they were bringing him back to let him go. They brought him back to put him on trial. And most of the charges against him is human trafficking, besides murder and things like that. Almost as much money is made trafficking right now as there is in illegal drugs. I got to stop right there. I hear footprints, footsteps flying up the ramp. We'll pick up here next week. Signs of the last days. They're all around us. All we have to do is open our eyes and pay attention. Things are picking up quickly. Brother Ken, would you close us in prayer? Amen.